HighPoint is now releasing a new Rocket controller card that's going to require a 16-lane slot. So let's take a look at what it requires, what it does, the chipset, and what operating systems it works with. Now, according to this information from HighPoint, and this is all we have when we can look at the documentation, we're looking at a Rocket U 1388C, the industry's first 8-port dedicated 10 gigabit USB 3.2 controller. It's going to require PCI Express 3.0 by 16. Now that just strikes me as kind of odd. If you're going to come up with a controller card that's going to be an add-in, we're looking for something on USB 4. 20 years ago, I would have said Promise Technology would do this, but now they're not. HighPoint is the one stepping up to this, which I'm really surprised. But to see this card, it's using an AS Media chipset. We can take a look at it. But for 8 ports, what it looks like is there are 2 ports per controller, 4 controllers, 2 lanes each. That's 8 lanes. So I don't know what they're doing with the other lanes. And there's also an extra power tap. I believe it's a 8-pin power tap. And if you're going to use all the ports, you want all the power, so things will connect, you need to plug in that power tap. We can take a look at, let's see what else we can find. If you'll notice here, we see 3 icons, Mac, Windows, and Linux. And yes, it'll also support the Mac M1. I've already read about that. So I'll have this documentation up in the description so you can read about it. Our concern, because it's PCI Express 3.0 by 16, that's a 16-lane slot. Okay, what chipsets are going to have a 16-lane slot? We've outlined 4 different computer levels to build based on the Adobe After Effects multi-frame rendering CPU optimization formula. This is a great idea. This is a great start, but they need to be making a card that doesn't take 16 lanes, not even 8 lanes. There needs to be a card that only requires 4 lanes, because after we do this video, we're going to take a look at an X570 chipset that we keep getting asked about for a quad card versus a dual card for an M.2 adapter. If the number 1 requirement on a motherboard is the video card and the number 2 requirement is an M.2 card, what do you do with slot number 3? Slot number 3, unless you have a high-end desktop, and by the way, the system we do all our testing on has 2 16-lane slots and 2 8-lane slots. For us to utilize that card, something's got to go. The question is what? Now right now we have an RTX 2080 Ti because it's 2 slots wide. We have our quad card here. We have Thunderbolt 3 in this slot. And down here we have the Supermicro dual M.2 NVMe adapter. So our 4 slots, we're spent. So the next thing for a card like this that's going to require a 16-lane slot is a workstation. Well, we're talking about a WRX80. However, there's another video we're getting ready to do about another chipset with a motherboard that I would not have had in my radar for a workstation that this will work on. I'll just say Xeon. We'll have all this information in the description for the bibliography. This is the chipset being used by HighPoint on that USB-C card, the ASM 3142. It's an AS Media chipset. So you can read about the description, the requirements, what it does, what it doesn't do, what the throughput is, how many lanes, all that information. Now, as far as connectivity, this card does not require a driver. Once this card's installed, the device will enumerate, and they suggest going through the tree like you're in Windows and make sure everything is enumerated correctly, but everything will be seen. Be sure and plug in that power tap, and right by the power tap is another plug, but I can't figure out what that's for, and I can't find anything in the documentation. It may have something to do with programming the chip. As far as I know, I don't. So again, to reiterate, it'll work on a Mac, an Apple M1, with Thunderbolt platforms. It'll work on a PC. It'll work with Linux, workstations, rack mounts, motherboards, but you got to have a 16-lane slot. And for those wondering if you can put this in a rack, it is a full height card. And if you have any questions about the cables, a 1 meter 10 gigabit USB-C to USB-C, a 1 meter 10 gigabit USB-C to USB-A, a 2 meter 10 gigabit USB-C to USB-A, and a 0.6 10 gigabit USB-C to USB micro B cable. All 10 gigabit cables. So 1, 2, 3, 4. For Windows, it'll work all the way back to Windows 7 forward, and for Windows Server, Windows 2008 forward, 64-bit editions only. And for the Apple M1 platform support, it requires an RS6661A. You can look that module up, but in essence what it is a Thunderbolt external dock to use that to connect with this on the M1. Here's a good view of the ports. 4 ports and 4 ports. Remember, 2 ports on each controller, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 times 4 is 8. And again, to reiterate, I question and I wonder what they're doing with those other 8 lanes. And here on the back end of the card, we can see that power tap, and this is the other connector that I have no idea what it does. And to reiterate, my guess is programming. a point for conjecture, but they don't say. And of course the chipset is underneath that heatsink. So that's just a little something we came across that I wanted to share with you, because there's going to be a need for that, but I hope they'll scale it to something everybody can use. And things like this, we can talk about how it references and plays out with other computers, whether it be the TRX-40, the WRX-80, or even the X570. So my name's Gil Boyd. I want to thank you guys for watching. This is Builder Buy. We're on to the next video.